Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Further, to continue with the deciphering of the book of Genesis and Quran, today let us understand more details related to Pluto. Presently, Pluto is a dwarf planet, but earlier it was considered as planet. As I have mentioned in one of my previous presentation, 12 planets in the solar system, according to the creator of the universe, Pluto is one of the planet of the solar system, and the life history of Prophet Joseph represents the history of Pluto, and Prophet Jacob represents the sun. Before I proceed with the story of Joseph, let me tell you one thing. There is an important message regarding the 7 days of darkness and great famine at the end of this presentation. Therefore, I request you all to watch the entire presentation without skipping, as it is essential to understand the message properly. According to the present scientific knowledge, there are 8 planets in the solar system, and all the planets are aligned along the ecliptic plane within 1 to 6 degrees and travel around the sun in nearly perfect circular orbits except Pluto. The Pluto is having an eccentric and inclined orbit ranging from 30 to 49 astronomical units with an inclination of 17.16 degree from the ecliptic plane. Several theories are proposed to explain this orbital chaos, but they all fail to provide a satisfactory explanation for the orbital chaos of Pluto. But the lone creator of the universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has provided the answer for this orbital chaos beforehand in the scriptures. With the knowledge bestowed on me by the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let me unravel the important events responsible for the orbital chaos of the planet Pluto with the help of scriptures. The story of Prophet Joseph is exclusively mentioned in all the important scriptures like Quran, Bible, and Torah. A lengthy discussion is there in the book of Genesis in the chapter number 37 to 50, whereas a separate chapter number 12, Surah Yusuf, is devoted to the story of Joseph in Quran. This shows that the story of Joseph is having an important significance in the creation of the solar system. The events occurred in the life of Prophet Joseph are the human enactment of the events that occurred to the Pluto. Through this story, the lone creator of the universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is conveying the answers to the orbital chaos of Pluto. Joseph is the 11th son born to Jacob at the old age. Moreover, Rachel, to whom Jacob loved more than anyone else, is the one who bore Joseph to Jacob. Because of this, Jacob loved Joseph more than all his sons, as mentioned in the book of Genesis, chapter number 37, verse number 3, and Quran, chapter number 12, verse number 8. This indicates that Pluto has formed at the later stages of the formation of the solar system. The book of Genesis, chapter number 37, verse number 3, also states that Jacob had made a special tunic for Joseph. This indicates that the outer surface of the Pluto is unique compared to other planets of the solar system. As we all know, the surface of the Pluto is made up of solid ice of nitrogen and other gases, which shows different colors. According to the Genesis chapter number 37 verse number 2, when Joseph was 17 years old, while working with his brothers Naphtali, Dan, Asher and Gad, representing Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars respectively, Joseph brought back a bad report about them to his father. All these reasons made his brothers to hate him, and they made a plot to kill Joseph. According to the Quran, chapter number 12, verse number 10, and Genesis, chapter number 37, verse number 21, Reuben, representing Jupiter, suggested not to kill Joseph, instead to throw him into a deep well in the wilderness. Here, the well is a gravity well existing in the region between Ariga, Gemini, and Taurus constellations, which is mentioned as Dothan in Genesis, chapter number 37, verse number 15. In Chinese mythology, the stars present at the southern region of constellation Gemini are known as eastern wells, which could be the region of Dothan. According to the Genesis, chapter number 37, verse number 23, when Joseph reached his brothers at Dothan, they stripped him off of his special tunic and threw him into a well. According to the Quran, chapter number 12, verse number 17, Joseph's brothers said to their father that when we were engaged in racing competition, a wolf ate Joseph. According to Genesis, chapter number 37, verse number 25, Joseph's brothers sat down to eat their food. All this information suggests that when all the 10 planets of the solar system were aligned in a line, their gravitational force pushed the Pluto downwards from the plane of ecliptic into gravity well. The action of Joseph's brother returning to their father, as mentioned in the verse number 16 of chapter number 12 in Quran, suggests that this alignment has occurred when these planets were at the aphelion position of the sun's orbit. The alignment of planets could be like this, as shown in this slide, where some of the planets are aligned in a single line. The action of stripping off of Joseph's tunic indicates that during this time the outer surface of Pluto was ripped off by the gravitational force of this planetary alignment. Due to this action, a portion of the white surface of Pluto has turned into red, which is compared with the blood of animal, as mentioned in Quran chapter number 12, verse number 18, and Genesis chapter number 37, verse number 31. According to Genesis chapter number 37, verse number 32, and Quran chapter number 12, verse number 18, Joseph's brothers have brought his blooded tunic to their father. This indicates that the inner planets Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars have taken away a portion of nitrogen from Pluto during this occasion. This is how the Earth's atmosphere has got enriched with nitrogen after this event. When Jacob's sons told him that a wolf has eaten Joseph, Jacob tore his clothes and put on sackcloth, as mentioned in Genesis chapter number 37, verse number 34. This suggests that during this time the sun's surface has modified into a surface which resembles sackcloth. If we carefully observe, the sun's photosphere is having numerous polygonal tiles which resembles sackcloth. In the meantime, a caravan of Ismailite which was traveling from Galilee to Egypt lifted Joseph up from the well and took him as merchandise to Egypt, as mentioned in Quran chapter number 12 verse number 19 and Genesis chapter number 37 verse number 25. Later, the Midianites sold Joseph to Potiphar, who is the captain of the guard at Egypt, for a cheap price, as mentioned in Quran chapter number 12 verse number 20 and Genesis chapter number 37 verse number 36. This indicates that one of the stars belonging to the constellation Canis Major, which was traveling from Ophiuchus to Orion, has pulled the Pluto up from the gravity well and took it to the constellation Orion, where another big star, could be the Bellatrix of constellation Orion, has captured it from the previous star, where the star Bellatrix represents the Potiphar. This also indicates that at this time Pluto was pulled up to the plane of ecliptic from its lowest point. The book of Genesis chapter number 39 and Quran chapter number 12 verse number 22 to 35 explains the story of Potiphar's wife and Joseph. Potiphar appointed Joseph as overseer of his household and put him in charge of everything he owned, as he was considered Joseph as his adopted son, as mentioned in the Quran chapter number 12 verse number 21. When Joseph reached his maturity, he was well built and good looking, handsome man. Potiphar's wife became attracted to Joseph and tried to seduce him. One day, she shut the door and said to have sex with her. Joseph refused her invitation as he was a God-fearing man and a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On this, she advanced towards Joseph to grab him, but Joseph ran towards the door. She chased him and tore his shirt from behind in order to stop him. When they reached the door, they found Potiphar at the door. On this, the lady said to Potiphar, Joseph tried to humiliate me. Then Joseph replied to clear the accusation and said, it was she who tried to seduce me. When Potiphar was in dilemma, one of his household people suggested, if his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth and he is the liar. But if his shirt is torn from the back, then she has lied and he is the truthful. When Potiphar saw that Joseph's shirt was torn from behind, he asked Joseph to neglect this incident and asked the lady to seek forgiveness for her sins, as she was indeed the wrongdoer. In spite of this, the lady continued to yearn for him and prompted her husband to imprison Joseph. And this Potiphar put Joseph into prison. All this information indicates that when Pluto has completely formed in the constellation of Orion, a companion neutron star of Bellatrix star has tried to capture Pluto. It was inkling to capture Pluto as Pluto was in approachable distance from it. It chased Pluto, and due to its repulsive force, Pluto was repelled and started moving towards the exit of Orion constellation. But Bellatrix was at the point of exit and it blocked the escape of Pluto from the Orion constellation. During this incident, the surface of Pluto's rear side was torn upon due to the gravitational pull of neutron star. Here, in this photograph, you can see the torn or rugged surface of the Pluto on the rear side of Pluto. Later, the combined gravitational force of neutron star and Bellatrix star has pushed Pluto to a void which is mentioned as prison. Through this story, the Creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning all those married women who yearn for extramarital relations not to seduce any male and commit this sin. And at the same time, it also teaches all the males to abstain from such seductions and follow the path the Prophet Joseph adopted and save oneself from the God's punishment. The book of Genesis, chapter number 40, and Quran, chapter number 12, verse number 36 to 42, conveys a story of cupbearer and a baker who were with Joseph in the prison. One night, they both had a dream and sought its interpretation from Joseph. The cupbearer told his dream to Joseph. There was a vine with 3 branches in front of me. Its blossoms opened and ripened into grape, which I squeezed into Pharaoh's cup and handed it over to Pharaoh. The baker told his dream to Joseph. There were 3 baskets full of white bread on my head, and birds were eating them from the basket. Joseph interpreted their dreams and said, in 3 days the cupbearer will be reinstated to his old position, and the baker will be crucified, and birds will eat his flesh. Joseph told to the cupbearer to make mention of him to Pharaoh and bring him out of the prison, but the cupbearer forgot Joseph when he was reinstated later. This indicates that there were 3 linear nebulae and 3 circular or irregular nebulae present at the place where the cupbearer and the baker were present, which is mentioned as 3 vines and bread basket respectively. Out of these 3 linear nebulae, many stars were formed, which is compared with a bunch of grapes, whereas the circular nebulae were destroyed by the star Betelgeuse, which is mentioned as Pharaoh, and consumed by different stars that are mentioned as birds. The star representing the cupbearer was pulled out of the void by Betelgeuse, whereas the star representing the baker was destroyed by the Betelgeuse. As you can see in the picture, these are the 3 branches of vines. This is the picture of the cupbearer holding a jar, and adjacent to it, you can see a cup in the Pharaoh's hand. This could be the region where Pluto was pushed into a void, which is mentioned as prison. As Joseph said, the Pharaoh reinstated the cupbearer, but he forgot Joseph for a long time, and because of this, Joseph was left in the prison for another 2 years. The book of Genesis, chapter number 41, and Quran, chapter number 12, verse number 43 to 57, mentions the Joseph's rise to power in Egypt. One day, Pharaoh had a dream in which he has seen 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 lean cows, and likewise 7 healthy heads of grains grown on one stalk was eaten up by 7 thin dried heads of grains. For this, Pharaoh asked interpretation, but when all his wise men failed to provide its interpretation, the cupbearer remembered Joseph and said to Pharaoh to send him to the prison for a brief period. Joseph interpreted the dream and said that the Egypt will have 7 years of great abundance and later 7 years of famine. For this, you have to preserve the grains which is produced during the time of abundance for the period of famine. After that, a year of abundance will come in which the people will get a good harvest. Then the Pharaoh sent his officials to bring Joseph from the prison, but Joseph told the officials to ask the king to resolve the allegations put on him. The king found out that it is the ladies who tried to seduce Joseph, and Joseph did not betray his master and was absolutely loyal to his master. The king found Joseph a trustworthy and loyal man, therefore, he appointed Joseph as the overseer of all his resources. This is how Joseph rose to higher position in Egypt. All this information indicates that there was an abundance and scarcity of hydrogen or star forming molecular gas for 7 years each in the constellation Orion. Meantime, some of the stars of Betelgeuse star system have pulled the Pluto from the void, and later the star Betelgeuse pushed the Pluto to an elevated orbit from the plane of ecliptic. This elevation of orbit represents the Joseph rise to power in Egypt. This is how Pluto was elevated to the higher levels, and this is the reason why Pluto is having highly inclined orbit. As you can see in this slide, this group of stars of Orion represent the 7 spikes of grains grown on one stalk, and this could be one of the cows which are coming out of the Nile, which represents the trail of the Milky Way galaxy. The book of Genesis, chapter number 42 to 44, and Quran, chapter number 12, verse number 58 to 101, mentions about the visit of Joseph's brother to Egypt. As mentioned in the Genesis, chapter number 41, verse number 53 to 57, after the 7 years of abundance in Egypt, there was a famine all over the earth. Therefore, people from every country came to Egypt to buy grain. The famine was severe even in the Canaan. On the advice of Jacob, 10 of his sons went down to Egypt to buy grains, as mentioned in the Genesis chapter number 42, verse number 1 to 5, and Quran chapter number 12, verse number 58. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they failed to recognize Joseph. This indicates that there was a scarcity of hydrogen or star-forming molecular gas in all the constellations, and during this time, 10 of the planets of solar system went down to the constellation Orion from Taurus, so where they get these gases. The subsequent verses mention that Joseph gave the grain to his brothers and asked them to bring their youngest brother along with them next time to get the grain. As a security, Joseph imprisoned Simeon and asked his servants to hide their money in the sacks so that they may come back. This indicates that except Vesta, which represents Simeon, the remaining 9 planets came back to the land of Canaan. This also indicates that during this time the Pluto has captured the Vesta, due to which the Vesta is also having a highly inclined orbit with an inclination of 7.14 degrees. After returning to Canaan, they told their father to send Benjamin along with them to bring the provisions next time. They also found the returned money in their sack and told their father that they can bring more provisions if he sends Benjamin. After taking an oath from all of them, Jacob agreed to send his youngest son along with them to Egypt and suggested them not to enter Egypt by one entrance, instead enter by different entrances. This indicates that on a second visit, when all the 10 planets entered the constellation Orion, there was no alignment of planets in a single line, they were scattered. The alignment of planets could be like this, as shown in this slide, as portrayed by the creator himself, where these 10 stars at the boundary of constellation Taurus and Orion are aligned. Joseph instructed his servants to hide a silver cup in the Benjamin's sack while loading the provisions. In the morning, when they all left the city, one of the Joseph's servants called and said, "You are thieves. You stole the king's cup." Joseph searched all their sacks from elder to the youngest one and found the cup in Benjamin's sack. As they had told earlier, in whose bag it will be found, he will be detained. According to that, Joseph detained Benjamin. All this information indicates that at this time the major star representing the cup of Betelgeuse was eclipsed by the planet Charon, which represents Benjamin. When they all failed to get Benjamin released from Joseph's custody, the Reuben decided to stay back in Egypt and sent others to convey this matter to Jacob. This indicates that at this time the Pluto captured the Charon, and Jupiter representing Reuben was still in the constellation Orion, and other planets of solar system came back to the land of Canaan. On hearing the Benjamin's detention in Egypt, Jacob became depressed and turned his face away from his sons, and his eyes turned white with grief. This indicates two important phenomena. First, the sun has flipped its poles and the planets were made to face the rear side of the sun. And secondly, due to the decaying and overstraining effect at its eye position, which is near the sun's equator, it turned white in color, forming white spots or plages on the sun, as you can see in this picture. This may also indicate that the sun may lose its light during this phenomenon. Later, Jacob told his sons to go back to Egypt and search for Joseph and Benjamin. On this, they returned to Egypt and requested Joseph to give abundant grains in charity as they are in great distress and have little money. On hearing this, Joseph could not control himself and revealed himself to his brothers and said, I am Joseph, and this is my brother. Joseph gave abundant provisions to them and asked them to bring their families to Egypt. He also gave his shirt and asked them to lay it over his father's face so that Jacob may regain his sight. When they returned, they laid down the Joseph's shirt over Jacob's face, and Jacob regained his sight. This indicates that there was a scarcity of nitrogen in the sun to complete the CNO cycle. As a result, some parts of the sun was losing light, and when one of the inner planets shared its nitrogen to the sun, its CNO cycle restarted and the sun regained its light. It also suggests that in future, when sun consumes all its hydrogen, it loses its light, but it regains its light by capturing nitrogen from one of the inner planets to continue the CNO cycle. This time, the responsibility of providing nitrogen to the sun lies on Earth, as in the past, the other three inner planets have already provided the nitrogen to sun by the action of escape of their atmosphere to the space. Later, the sun and his family moved to Egypt, which suggests that in the past, the sun has entered the Orion arm in the Milky Way galaxy, and in the future, the sun will change its course towards the Orion constellation, where it gets more hydrogen. When they reached Egypt, all the 11 brothers bowed down in front of Joseph, which indicates that when the solar system enters into the constellation Orion, the axis of the 11 planets will tilt towards the Pluto, barring Sun and the Moon. This is the dream Joseph had, as explained in the beginning of this story in the Genesis as well as in the Quran. It is stated in the Genesis chapter number 45, verse number 17 to 24 that to bring his father and his family, the Pharaoh sent the wagons, which suggests that in the future there will be asteroids entering the solar system from the constellation Orion. In particular, could be originating from the explosion of Orion star Betelgeuse, which provide the fuel to the sun. Now, let's talk about the human enactment of this story, which is presently happening in our life. All these events occur in a cyclic and subcyclic manner, and the major cycle are called as Yuga in India. Presently, we are in the transition period of one such Yuga, and some of these events have already happened and few more to occur shortly. To keep the video short, I am skipping many details which can be discussed with the science and religious scholars once they join hands with me. If we summarize the whole story, we can notice the following important events that occurred in the life of Joseph, who represents Pluto. First, Joseph was pushed to anonymity by his brothers while they were engaged in racing competition, and then he was sold in Egypt as slave. During this, Jacob tore his clothes on hearing that Joseph was killed by a wolf. According to Genesis chapter number 38, Judah's daughter-in-law Tamar has sent a seal, a card, and a staff to Judah which belongs to him. After this, Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph, and later Joseph was sent to prison. After a couple of years, Joseph was released from the prison and elevated to a higher position in Egypt. After 7 years of abundance, the 7 years of famine started in Egypt. Then Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to buy provisions as there was famine in Canaan. On their second visit, Joseph revealed to Benjamin that he is his brother. Joseph's brothers tore their clothes when King's silver cup was found in Benjamin's luggage and was caught. On hearing the Benjamin's retention in Egypt, Jacob became depressed and turned his face away from his sons, and his eyes turned white with grief. On the subsequent visits, Joseph revealed himself to his other brothers. Joseph sent his clothes to his father through his brothers, by which Jacob regained his eyesight. Later, the Pharaoh and Joseph sent wagons and donkeys loaded with provisions to Jacob, by which Jacob and his family went to Egypt. Jacob sent Judah ahead of him to accompany Joseph to Goshen. Later, Joseph took 5 of his brothers and introduced them to Pharaoh. Finally, Jacob and his family settled in Goshen in Egypt, as there was severe famine in the land of Canaan. Now, let me show you a few important events that are occurring in our life since the past couple of decades, which are related to Joseph's story. If we carefully observe, we can notice that there was a planetary alignment during early 2005. Later, in the subsequent year 2006, the planet Pluto was downgraded from the planet's position, which is comparable with the event where Joseph was sent to prison. The scientists have reported during early 2023 that a portion of the sun's surface was blasted off from it, which is comparable to the tearing of clothes by Jacob. During 2018, the interstellar object Oumuamua, and during the early 2023, a green comet visited the solar system, which represents the staff and a seal of Judah sent by Tamar. As we all know, there was a severe drought during 2014-15 due to El Nino effect, and after that there was a period of abundance for 7 years till 2022. But at the same time, there was scarcity of rainfall at many places of the world. Since the past few years, some of the countries like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and African countries are facing famine. Though the El Nino effect was noticed globally during 2015 and 2019, but India is having abundance of rainfall till now because it represents the Egypt for the earth and facing a period of abundance. I request the concerned authorities to store abundant food grains for future, as there will be severe famine for the next 7 years in the world, including India. During 2022, there was an alignment of 5 planets which was visible in India as well, which is comparable to the visit of Joseph's brother to Egypt. Similar to the event where Joseph informing to Benjamin that he is his brother, I have identified and announced in one of my previous presentations 12 planets in the solar system during 2022 that the Pluto is the 11th planet of the solar system. In the past couple of years, the Earth's surface has cracked open either due to the severe drought or due to the tectonic activity. Similarly, even on the other planets also, its surface might have cracked open due to some phenomena which is comparable to the tearing of clothes by Joseph's brothers. A recent report mentions that there is a reactivation of tectonic activity in the Mars. This might have developed cracks on the Mars also. Only scientists have to confirm this through a detailed study. I have already mentioned that the action of Jacob turning his face away from his sons and losing his eyesight due to grief representing the flipping of its poles by sun, and during this time it loses its light as the prophet Jacob represents the sun. This marks the beginning of the future events where the sun is shortly going to flip its poles, and due to this there will be darkness on the earth for some time as the sun loses its light during this phenomenon for some time. It is mentioned in one of the Indian texts, Bhavishya Malika, that there will be darkness for 7 days at the end of Kali Yuga. Even the scientists have predicted that during the mid 2025, the sun is going to flip its poles. This indicates that there will be darkness for 7 days on the earth after the flipping of poles by sun. I request the astronomy and astrology scholars to join hands with me to obtain the exact timing of this event. There was an alignment of 5 planets during mid 2023, and it is predicted that there will be one more alignment of 5 planets during mid 2024, which marks the second and third visit of Joseph's brothers to Egypt, respectively. And I hope that the IAU will reinstate Pluto as 11th planet shortly. This will mark the return of this red heifer to Israel, where Israel represents the solar system. According to this story, meteors and asteroids will visit to the solar system, but symbolically, it may represent the Orionids meteorites. After this event, the sun will regain its light. Later, there will be an alignment of 5 planets along with Pluto, which is visible in India, which is comparable with the incident where Joseph taking 5 of his brothers and introducing them to Pharaoh. Then many people will migrate to India and its adjacent countries, which represents the Egypt, as there will be severe famine all over the world. This is comparable with the migration of Jacob and his family to Egypt. This mass migration is called as Ghazwa-e-Hind by the Prophet Muhammad. This could be the beginning of the Qiyamah, the Pralaya, the Armageddon, the apocalypse for the humans. Yes, this is the recurring human enactment of the life history of the Sun and Pluto. But one thing to be noted, at present, many events are occurring in a combination. Therefore, do not get stick to one phenomena, as many events related to the second coming of Jesus, Dajjal, and Yajuj Majuj is also occurring simultaneously. These will cause the massive solar flares hitting the earth, sea level rise, flooding, drought, famine concurrently. The lone creator of the universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has warned us about the future events well in advance, but we fail to understand this till today. Nevertheless, through this presentation, herewith I am conveying his warning and cautioning all the people of the world to be well prepared to face the 7 days darkness and the famine and take appropriate measures and strictly obey the commands of the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the human race, as this is the beginning of the mass extinction. Yes, we are heading towards a mass extinction. Therefore, I request you all to submit yourself to the lone creator of the universe, Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and pray for a place in the heaven. Please share this presentation with everyone to spread the message of Allah to protect the human race from the great famine and other events occurring shortly. Similarly, in the past as well, there was a mass migration from Europe to Indian region, which is known as Aryan migration. And the history repeats this time as well, which marks the beginning of Satya Yuga. Similarly, for the Earth, the Satya Yuga may start after 2113, as by this time the Pluto is at its aphelion, which is its culmination point, which is comparable with the incident where Joseph sitting at the top and his brothers prostrating in front of him. This could be the beginning of Qiyamah, the Pralaya, the Armageddon, the apocalypse for the Earth. According to a report, all 9 planets were aligned on the same side of the Sun during 1982. Later, Pluto reached its perihelion point on 5th September 1989, and it will reach its aphelion point on 23rd August 2113. The action of performing prostration in front of Joseph by his brothers indicates that during this time the axis of all the planets was tilted, and it may repeat in future as well during 2113 AD. All this information implies that the religion is not different than science and science is not different than religion. They go hand in hand and they are intertwined. To understand more scientific knowledge that is hidden in the scriptures and to get notification, please subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to share. I have deciphered some of the events which took place in the life history of Pluto and their associated events which are destined to occur shortly in our life. Further deciphering of other phenomena and future events requires more data and time, but the events are occurring in a rapid pace. Therefore, I request the science and religious scholars to join hands with me to decode all the scriptures of the world and save the human race. Let us spread the true knowledge of all the scriptures of the world in a right spirit. This is my honest interpretation of the scriptures, but the true knowledge lies with the lone creator of the universe, whose name is Allah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.